Stand by. We're going live. We're going live. 10, 9, going live. 7, 6, 5, going live. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to 10 Seconds to Air. I'm Alita Guillen. Cooking is an amazing form of communication. Most of us have a favorite dish that reminds us of spending time with friends or family. For me, there's nothing like the smell of roasting chicken and my mother's rice pilaf that brings everyone running to the kitchen. My grandmother was a first-generation immigrant who spoke little English, but told us she loved us by cooking the most amazing foods. I remember spending many hours with her in the kitchen, helping her put together those intricate dishes that I don't make anymore, but that would delight the entire family. She loved cooking, but more than that, she lived for the effect it had on the people she loved. One of the best gifts that I got from my grandmother and my mother was the passion and art of cooking. I love to cook. Oftentimes, like many of us, I look to the internet for a new recipe or a twist to an old recipe, and many times I come across Melissa Clark. I am always impressed by her incredible ability to make things simple and delicious. Well, joining me today is food writer, best-selling author, and New York Times food columnist Melissa Clark. She's been communicating with and about food for more than 20 years. Melissa has written more than 40 cookbooks and has won 2 James Beard Foundation awards. She has been writing for the New York Times cooking section since 2007, and somehow she keeps coming up with new recipes and new ways to communicate about them. Her recipe videos are master classes, super fun and easy to follow. Melissa joins me now to talk about how she came to be the most recognized name on the New York Times cooking app, her challenges as a food writer, and how she keeps herself and the rest of us inspired through food. Here now is Melissa Clark. Hi, Melissa. How are you?
Hi, Alita. So nice to be here.
Wow. Hope you don't mind the dog barking in the background. He loves food, too.
Oh, he must be hungry.
He's barking about something. What are we cooking up today? What's on the menu today?
Oh, actually, today is you are reaching me on a good day. I have a lot of things going on. I'm making orzo with caramelized zucchini and pesto.
Yum.
Yeah, so that's going to be for a column that I'm working on. I did a beautiful nectarine upside down cobbler.
Sounds complicated.
Oh, the dog his poor mouth is watering. He's like, nectarine cobbler, yum.
She'll be in here in a second. Don't worry about it. She'll come in looking for that cobbler. How many recipes do you think you've written over your career? Hundreds, thousands.
Thousands, yeah, thousands.
So I have to ask you, what goes through your mind 10 seconds before you communicate these recipes to the rest of us who are salivating about them?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I think, the most analogous thing that I can think of, just in terms of the idea of like 10 seconds before you're on air, right? I think it is really when I'm doing a recipe demo, whether it's on the Today Show or it's for one of my videos. Probably live TV is the most, apropos to the question, right? Because camera's about to go on. I am going to show a recipe. Everything is in front of me. And the thing that I'm really thinking about is I am going over the nuts and bolts of that recipe. I am getting all my, my ducks in a row. I'm making sure that my parsley is where I can reach it. I'm making sure that my, I'm like surveying. But then the most important thing that I do is I'm trying to get a connection, because when I'm doing most of the, the demos for a morning show, say, I'm with a host, right? I'm with someone else. I'm trying to connect to them. So there's a lot going on in those 10 seconds. I'm like, whose eyes am I going to look at? Oh my God, everybody is so much taller than I am on TV. I got to make sure I look up, and can I, are the pot holders where I need them to be when I reach for the pan? So there's a lot going on.
So sounds like it's very, like you said, nuts and bolts. You're trying to organize all of that. So then I'm going to ask you kind of again, maybe it's not for TV, but when you're communicating the recipes that you have spent so much time on, you're now having to simplify it or articulate it in such a way that those of us at home actually get it and can repeat it and create what you have created. So what's the moment before that when you're trying to put it on paper?
Yeah. So when I'm trying to put it on paper, that's actually the hardest moment of all. Coming up with the recipe itself is easier because I just follow what I'm hungry for, and there's so many factors that go into that, and what's in season and what I have and what's convenient. But when I'm writing it, when I'm about to write it, that is when I question my existence in the world. Really, I'm like, why am I writing this? What do I have to say? I have nothing new to say about grilled salmon. There is nothing. Why am I even contributing? Why am I even a food writer? Why is salmon even a fish? Like real existential questions in a way. And I have to talk myself down, and I have to say, you know what? You're writing. Yes, there are a lot of grilled salmon recipes out there, but this is different from those, and you have something to say on it, and don't forget. And I remind myself that I'm a teacher, and that I can help people get this dish onto the table, and I have valuable lessons to teach them, and I do have something to say. But it's really hard because I think a lot of writers, whether you're writing about food or writing a memoir or writing a news story, you just wonder, what is the thing I have to say?
Okay, so I think it's so interesting that you actually doubt yourself. That is shocking. There's no question in my mind that you are the speaker to me on what I need to do in the kitchen. It's interesting to me that on the other end, you are doubting that.
I mean, and not in a way that runs very deep, because I do know that I have something to say, and I absolutely am sure that I am contributing something valuable, because I believe it's very important to help people get dinner on the table. That is no small thing. But at the same time, I think we go through stages as writers. When you're a young writer and you're just starting out, you doubt yourself because you don't know that you have the authority and the right to put things on paper, right? So I struggled with that. And now that I'm on the other side of that, I think, but I've written it all before.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's sort of like, where's the sweet spot where I'm like, I know everything and it's perfect and I'm going to write it. I have not actually ever been through that moment, but I also think it's okay. I think doubting yourself, because I see it, it plagues me for a few minutes and I get through it. It's something that I pass through. It's familiar discomfort.
Well, it's nice to know that you're human. It's nice to know that you're human, maybe not in the kitchen. So the recipes come to you, you're saying, how can I do another twist on salmon or whatever? How do you do that? How many different salmon recipes or chicken recipes do you have, and how do you make them different?
Yeah, they're endless. I mean, you can always find something else to do. I do have to think about it. I spend a lot of time I spent a lot of, really, the biggest inspiration for me, is going to the market, going to the farmer's market, looking at what's there. And it's like every dinner is like a little puzzle, and it's fun. It's a fun challenge. I know that I want to eat salmon, and I know that I just did a recipe actually, which was unusual. So it's rhubarb season in New York. Or was just rhubarb season. And I was writing a recipe for salmon, and salmon and rhubarb is not something I have ever done before. And I'm not saying it's never been done before, because I'm sure somebody's done it, but I haven't. And you think of rhubarb, I think most people think of rhubarb as a fruit, as a dessert. Sometimes maybe you'll see it in a chutney. You could see maybe pairing it with duck or poultry in that sort of fruity, sweet, savory way. But salmon isn't obvious. But there's something, it was seasonal. And also there's something about putting pink and pink together that I was just like, but it'll be so pink. It'll be so pretty. I want to make this work. And it took a few times to get it. Like it really took going over the recipe. I probably tested it about 4 times, which is probably about in the middle. But for salmon, you can usually get salmon pretty quickly because it's so simple to cook. But this did take me a while to balance the flavors, because you have to sweeten the rhubarb, but you don't want something too sweet with salmon, because that wasn't the palate I was looking for. It wasn't. But yeah, so so that was obviously a new thing, right? So that's a recipe where, for me, obviously new. I had never paired salmon with rhubarb. But then today I'm doing a different salmon recipe where, it's not that new. It's salmon with a mayonnaise, sriracha, lime thing. And those are, like that, you see that with salmon. That is not new. But what makes it exciting for me is that the technique. So instead of, I think the normal way that I usually would do it was I'd put the salmon on the roasting pan, skin side down. I'd slather the mayo, sriracha, lime on top, and I would roast it. This time I did it the other way. I slathered the mixture on the salmon flesh, turned it upside down, put some oil on the skin and broiled it. And the skin gets crispy. It insulates the salmon from overcooking because it's facing the heat. You do not have heat coming from below because you're using your broiler. So you get really nice, plush, perfectly cooked salmon in this flavorful mixture and crispy skin. So again, like not new, it's not rocket science, but it's a little bit of a twist on something I hadn't done before.
Yum. Okay, yum.
Yeah, that was really good.
So what's the process then? How do these recipes, these ideas come to you, and then how does it flow from there?
So yeah, I mean, it's hard to say where I got that idea. I guess I was just, sometimes the idea will come from a problem. It's like me trying to solve a problem. And the problem is the salmon skin, when I cook it against the baking sheet, sticks to the baking sheet and it gets soft and it's not very tasty. Mm-hmm. And you have to kind of scrape it up. And if you put foil down, then when you scrape it up, the foil comes up and you're losing you're not bringing out the best of the skin. And I love a salmon skin hand roll, crunchy and so good with sesame seeds and cucumber and like the extra crunch. So how do you get the salmon skin crunchy? And so that was where this recipe came from, was solving a problem. Let me flip it upside down. If you flip it upside down, you need something to insulate the bottom. So mayonnaise, and it's going to keep it from sticking. And I love mayonnaise as, I love to use it when I'm roasting things because it holds flavor really well. Like in the end, you're not tasting mayonnaise so much as you're tasting the sriracha and the lime, and the mayonnaise is just texture in a way. It's more of a it keeps it from sticking. Mm-hmm. So all these things come together, and that flavor combination is pretty straightforward. I use it a lot. Sriracha mayo is a classic, right? So that's how I thought of that. It was just like putting together these pieces, solving a problem, with a thing, using a recipe ingredients that I traditionally use. I like to do that when I do a recipe. I like to stay anchored at the beginning of testing, at least in something that I'm familiar with. And I change one thing at a time.
Okay. But it sounds to me like it originates for something you might want to eat. You're feeling like salmon. Rhubarb is in season right now. And
yes, exactly. So those are right. When I'm creating a dish, the first thing is, what am I hungry for? That is always what I ask myself. What am I hungry for? What do I want to eat? What do I want to feed my family? And then when I'm doing it for the Times, then you have other people who get involved, like editors who want to tell you that you really haven't done a weeknight chicken in a while. So how about that? Or when was the last time you did pasta? So then you're listening to them and you're taking their comments into account. A lot of times I'm hungry for something that I know isn't going to fly. Like I know that I, as much as I adore mackerel, I can tell you right now that my editors over at the Times, I would have to push hard to get a mackerel dish into my column, or squid. These are things that I love. I cook all the time, but they're something that I'll do for me, but I'm not going to do a recipe for them for the New York Times. I could put them in a cookbook.
Okay. Yeah.
But so it's, it becomes more collaborative.
Yeah. So you come up with one of the recipes, for example, the one that you're working on right now, or you've had a couple today that you mentioned. How many times do you make that, and who gets to eat it before the rest of us get the recipe?
Well, I make it as many times as it takes for it to be so good that even though I'm not hungry anymore, because I've already tasted it and I've eaten a million other things today, we eat it. Like when we stand over the dish and we can't stop eating, and this is my recipe tester and we know it's ready. Like for example, this nectarine cobbler thing that I made. We made one last week and it was good. It was good, but it was like maybe the dough needs to be thinner and crisper. Maybe we need to bake it a little bit longer. Maybe we need to cook some of the juices out of the nectarines before we add the dough so that they're more syrupy. And so we made all those tweaks. And last time we ate it and we're like, okay, this is good. Yep, getting there. This time we just couldn't stop eating it. We ate like half of the thing before lunch, which was, not such a good idea. But when you can't stop eating it, that you're onto something.
Right. Okay. So how many times do you think you'll make that before we get to see it and taste it?
That one, I guess this is probably like the fifth, the fifth time. So I had made it,
Wow.
but that's for baking. Baking is harder. Baking, you make a lot because there's so many variables, and I really like to change one thing at a time because it helps me keep track. It's just, I feel like it's a safer, slow and steady, man, slow and steady. That's how I am as a runner. That is how I am as a cook, as a recipe developer. Change one little thing and then go forward. So that took 5 times. But the salmon recipe I was telling you about with the sriracha, that's something that I make for my family. I make it for my husband and myself a lot. So and I could write that recipe, get it. We tested it today, made it once, boom, done.
Is there anything that you stay away from when you cook? I mean, you mentioned mackerel and things like that, but as far as ingredients or just anything that either you don't like or you know that other people won't like, and I don't mean as a dish like mackerel or squid or something, but maybe just the ingredients that go in that are subtleties.
That's hard to say. I mean, I pretty much love everything. I'm trying to think of things I don't use that other people use. I mean, no, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, just like in a sort of a broader philosophical place, I don't use a lot of processed ingredients. Like that's just not my cooking style. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's amazing recipes using soup mix. I have made them myself. I love a Lipton onion soup dip. I love it. I'm happy to eat, a casserole with cream of mushroom soup, bring it on, but I'm not going to make it. That is not the recipe I'm going to put out into the world. Mm-hmm. If you make it for me, I will be delighted, but I will not. I want to encourage people to use fresh foods, fresh ingredients. So this is a personal choice that I'm making. And it is philosophical. I mean, it really is about what I want to see you cook. More so than, things that I don't cook that way, but like I said, but I also enjoy it. It's not like I'm like tater tot casserole. Yum. I'm all over that. But, so but at the same time, there are some so then you split the difference between there's some processed ingredients, but then there's also some convenience foods that I will use to make people's life easier. So it really depends. I am a big reader of labels. I read the labels. I know what's in my food. And so that when I put out a recipe, I know every single ingredient in that recipe. There's no hidden, I don't know, like chemicals that I can't pronounce.
Yeah. And I think I heard you speak one time saying that if you see something in the store that you don't recognize, you buy it and you try to figure it out and put it into a recipe.
Oh yeah. If I'm in the farmer's market and there's an ingredient, or I'm in like a really large supermarket and I see an ingredient that I don't know what it is, I want to buy it and I want to play with it. And I really like a challenge. Like, I think that is fun. I just joined this fish CSA where they give me seafood that is a little bit more challenging. And I love it. I'm like, oh, good, eel. Okay, let's cook some eel, and I hadn't really done it before. And it was great. It was so delicious. I did a Japanese style with that delicious sweet sauce. Oh, it was so good.
Is that a recipe that's out now?
No, it's just for dinner.
That was just for you.
I'm not going to put a small recipe because, I mean, how many people are going to make eel for dinner?
Yeah.
Not that many.
I have to say, it's not my go-to.
I mean, a lot of people do make it. I mean, especially if you can buy eel that's already been cooked and it's vacuum packed and it is really good. I was using butterfly fillet of eel that is really hard to get. So I want to make recipes that people are going to make. I want to solve your dinner problem. I want to, I never think of dinner as a problem. Actually, I think dinner is just a pure joy, but I know there's a lot of people who think it's a problem, and I want to convince them that actually it's not. And even if you think it is, I can help you and we can make something delicious.
And for those people who maybe don't cook as often or just are starting out, what dish would you tell them to start with?
Oh, always start with your favorite thing. Always start with the thing that you love. In fact, the first time the first dish I taught my daughter how to make was green salad, because she loves green salad. She's very, very picky in a lot of ways, but she loves the salad. So I taught her how to make the dressing in the bowl with the salad, and she makes the salad now. She's 14. She has been making our salad that we eat every night for dinner for 5 years. So she was 9.
Okay, so start with what you love. Where did you start? Where did this love, this passion, even just, watching you and hearing you talk about food, you are so passionate about what you're doing. Where did that come from?
Oh, came from my childhood, right? All of those things, don't they come from they're just essential to us from when we were kids. And I grew up in a very foodie household. My parents were Julia Child people way back in, the 70s and 80s. And I grew up watching them cook together and separately, watching them throw dinner parties. I grew up in a family that would sit down to breakfast and wonder and talk about lunch, and sit down to lunch and talk about dinner. And food was our love language. It was like you said, like with your grandmother. How did your grandmother express her love for you? She cooked something delicious, right? And you were right there with her.
Totally.
So same thing in my family. And I always knew I wanted to be a writer. I feel like the writing was more essential to me even than the food. But food is my metaphor. It is my lens on the world. It's how I relate to people. It's how I express myself. And I could write. If I wasn't a food writer, I'd be another kind of writer. I wouldn't be a chef because I feel like that's a different discipline. It's a slightly different. It's still about food and love, absolutely, but it's a slightly different thing. So writing is the first thing, and food is how I tell my story.
And how did you get to that point?
So I knew this. I knew this about myself. And I was just in the right place at the right time. So I went to Columbia for an MFA in writing. So I was already writing. I was writing all kinds of different things. And every story I wrote had food in it. And I was in that sweet spot, that moment in the 90s where there was this thing called the internet happening and they needed content providers. This was pre-blog. There were no food blogs, but I started writing in that way. Like I was on the beginning. I never had a food blog exactly, but I wrote for food blogs. And then I started freelancing for newspapers and magazines. And I was just in the right place at the right time. So food blogging was really that was just how my career it unfolded in a way that it wouldn't have if I had been writing 10 years earlier. It would have gone in a different direction. I wouldn't have been able to do what I do. The way that I tell my stories in the Times is very linked to the voice of a food blogger, right? It's like, how did this recipe evolve and what is your connection to it? This wasn't really a style of writing before the 90s. Before that, you had restaurant criticism. And that's what people would say to me. Oh, you want to write about food? You want to write either cookbooks or restaurant criticism? There really was no other way to do it. So I was at the forefront of helping create this way to do it. And so I was really lucky. It was the right place, right time, right skill set. And it was something that I loved. And so it just came, one of those, just everything came together.
So in those early days when you were writing about food, were you writing about the food that you were eating? Were you writing about the food that you were cooking?
Yeah, the food I was cooking and eating. There was very much about so it wasn't restaurant criticism. So it wasn't really about eating food in restaurants. It was about food that I cooked, food that resonated with me from my childhood. I'd sometimes write about food memories. And again, this was just in that moment where that's what people were. There was a space for that. There was a space for that on the internet. Because you wouldn't see that really in a magazine. I guess Gourmet Magazine had a little bit of it. I think Lori Colwyn wrote about that. There was a few, you'd see it. And then MFK Fisher is the food writer. So if you ever ask a food writer what got them started, many will tell you that they read MFK Fisher.
What's your favorite food?
Oh God, I don't have a favorite food. I know what my favorite food is. My favorite food is whatever you're going to make me. And I love when people cook for me. That is my favorite food.
You do?
Yeah, because they don't want to cook for me. They're afraid. They're intimidated.
Of course.
So if you cook for me, it's my favorite food.
I don't blame them. Sure, I'll cook for you. I'll make one, but what am I going to cook for you? I would be frightened. What do you
cook that thing your grandmother cooked for you?
Yes, you're right.
I love it when people share their family recipes with me because it means something to them. That is the most meaningful connection in the world, I think. Breaking bread with someone, yes. Breaking bread with someone when they've cooked for you something meaningful to them and they're sharing it with you. Oh my God. Even talking about it gives me chills because it is, I think, one of the ultimate connections.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned something about you and your family. When I cook for you, you learn something about mine. We had friends over for dinner last night and I just roasted a chicken. It was really simple, but I roasted a chicken and my daughter, Dahlia, made the salad and I roasted some potatoes and duck. It was the simplest meal, but it was just like, that's how I wanted to share with them, like this roast chicken. I think that is just the dish that, if it's one of my essential dishes of my childhood. We often had Shabbat dinner at my grandmother's house when I was growing up, and she often made roast chicken a lot. I mean, it was just like, that's your cozy meal, your family cozy meal that I can share with my friends.
Yeah, it really is. It says, and I mentioned chicken, you mentioned chicken. It must have been what our grandparents made or had access to, because there is something about the smell of when you're roasting a chicken. Even my kids are in college and then they come back and I will make that when they come in the door because the house just smells so good. I don't know.
I know. Chicken skin. Oh, so good. So crispy.
So I have to ask you, I'm so curious of what your response is to this. So I read about the avocado and peas. Right. Okay. I was like, how's she going to feel about that?
Wikipedia, so you probably found it there.
There's no controversy about you, but there's this avocado, peas, guacamole thing that happened back a few years ago where you decided, what was it? You decided to trade green peas for the avocado and make a green peas guacamole, right?
Well, here's the thing about the story that everybody, because I wrote about it, everyone assumes it's my recipe. It wasn't my recipe. I was reporting on somebody else's recipe. It was a very, very famous, esteemed chef, Jean-Georges von Gerichten. Like, you can't get much famouser than him, right? It was his recipe. It was his restaurant. It was with his sous chef in a restaurant in Manhattan called ABC Cocina, a Mexican restaurant right by the farmer's market. So they were adding farmer's market inspired elements to traditional Mexican food. So it was springtime. Peas were in season. The dish was brilliant. It's such a smart thing to do. I mean, no, of course it's not traditional, but I mean, if you didn't have innovation, we wouldn't be eating half the things we adore. So I think it's great, but people got really mad.
because you put out the recipe. He was substituting, just for people who don't know, substituting green peas for avocado.
Just for some of it. Just, you have avocado and you have some green peas. The green peas add sweetness. The green peas keep the color. They lock the color in. So it's, when you make guacamole and it gets kind of like yellowish after a while, not green pea guacamole. It stays green. It is beautiful. It's delicious. But people did not like the idea of peas in their guacamole. They got very upset and they shot the messenger. I'm like, hey, it's not my recipe. I just wrote about it. But they didn't like the fact that I even put it in the paper. So
right.
I got,
right.
It was a thing. It was a thing. It was it was also it was a thing on Twitter, especially because even President Obama at the time weighed in on it, as did W. Bush. So with both parties agreeing for once.
Right. Oh my gosh. Do you make this dish? Do you still make it?
I would, except it's a chefy dish. It's, a pain in the butt. It's very, blanch the peas and da-da-da. So no, I don't make, and we actually eat a lot of guacamole. My daughter really loves it. So we eat it a lot. I would make it if I was going to do a party. I might do it, especially because, like I said, it keeps the color. It's perfect for putting out a couple of hours ahead. But it is not something in my immediate guacamole repertoire.
What is the most difficult part of being a food writer?
Eating too much. Sometimes at the end of, what I hate? When I'm testing too many dishes in one day, and at the end of the day, I can't eat dinner. And then that just makes me so sad because I love eating dinner. I like sitting down at the table with my family and eating dinner together. And when I don't test recipes every day because I have writing days and testing days, because it's just easier for me it's really hard for me to be interrupted when I'm writing. Like when I'm writing, I get into a zone, I sit at my desk, and sometimes I don't even get up. And my desk actually is my couch. I don't actually write at a desk. I write at a couch. So I sit on my couch, and sometimes I don't move for like 4 hours, which is bad. So I'm trying to drink more so that I have to get up and go to the bathroom more. So I'm working on not just sitting, but I get into a zone. And when I'm testing recipes, the kitchen is a mess. I have all the pots and pans out, and it's just easier for me to keep those 2 days separate. But then when I'm testing, I'll test 4 or 5 dishes in a day, and I'm eating all of them. And like I said, I keep testing till they're really delicious and I can't stop eating. And then I get too full and then I don't eat dinner. So that is a bummer. But that, I mean, honestly, that's really, if that's the worst thing about my job, I do a lot of schlepping. I have to like carry home a lot of groceries. I mean, I have a great job. I'm sorry. I'm really looking here. I'm trying to answer your question, but I really love what I do.
So you're talk a little bit about running. I see that you keep mentioning that you're running, or that I guess you kind of have to do that to keep up with, I don't know, you've got to exercise a little bit if you're going to keep on testing all this stuff. So how much do you run?
Oh, every day. I love it. I mean, and I don't run every day anymore. So I take a day off. So I run 6 days a week now. I don't run far. I run 1 to 2 miles. Sometimes I'll run 3, but not, so it's not a lot of running, but it's my mental health time. It's my chill time. I listen to podcasts and books. I'm out in the park. I always run outside. I don't like running on a treadmill. I like to be, even when it's freezing, even when it's raining, being out in the world is so important. And as a writer, and I go to the office occasionally, but mostly I work from home. I really need to make myself get out of the house. So running is just one of those thoughtful moments. I'm not a meditator, but I'm a runner. Yeah. So I feel like there's something, I'm sometimes I'll try to call it moving meditation to my husband who does meditate, and he'll kind of, raise an eyebrow like, really? You're listening to a podcast? I'm like, okay, fine. So it's not exactly moving meditation, but it is mental health for me.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's that time where you get into a zone, right? You start running and you just get into a zone and exhaust yourself to come back, probably so that you can write and cook. Amazing that you do all of that in your kitchen at home.
Yes. We don't have a testing kitchen at the New York Times. We have a studio kitchen where we do all our video shoots, which is great. It's beautiful. It's great. I love it. I love going there. I love my colleagues, but it's not a place for testing. So testing has to happen in the individual food columnist's home.
Wow. Amazing. So Melissa Clark, 40 plus cookbook. Is it 40 or is it 41 now? 42?
Oh, 45.
45. Excuse 45. Me. 45. What's next for you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have another cookbook that I'm working on because I'm always working on a cookbook, but I'm also working on a memoir, which is exciting for me. It's slow going. It's, it's about my parents and my childhood. It's not as foodie a memoir as people would necessarily think. It's really about, don't we all have that in us? Like what's it like to grow up in your particular family at the time, place that you grew up? And so the more I'm writing it, the more I'm seeing it's about my parents' marriage and mine and my sister's place in the family unit. But I think about it as like their marriage to me, it was like this walnut, like, of course, food metaphor, right? But it was this like solid thing. But I was also very opaque and I couldn't really see in it. So it's just looking at it from different angles and I always think about it like trying to crack this nut, trying to understand it. So that's been really interesting and fun for me.
So that's next. When do you think you'll be done with that?
I don't even want to pressure myself, although deadlines are lifelines. So on the one hand, I don't want to pressure myself by telling you anything, but on the other hand, you got to have goals, right? So I'm hoping if I can finish it. So, maybe we're like 2 to 3 years out for publication.
Where did you grow up?
In Brooklyn, in Flatbush.
Okay. So you haven't ventured too far from home.
I have not. No, I haven't. I've always lived in New York. I've never lived anywhere in the United States except New York. I lived in Paris for a year, like a student year. Yeah. But otherwise, I went to Columbia. I went to Barnard, undergrad, Columbia grad, lived in New York.
Yeah.
I always say I've never lived in a place where I had to get into a car to drive to the mall, which is weird.
Yeah, it is weird for someone from someone who's lived all over the country. It's that's not normal. That's not usual.
It's not normal.
Yeah.
No.
Well, it sounds to me like you have an amazing life, a very busy and fast-paced life. And I thank you we all thank you. I speak for millions of people. We thank you for all these recipes. I think you got me through COVID. I don't know how many times how many different ways can I make this dish? And then I would find a new twist on it from Melissa Clark. I mean, just fantastic.
Oh, okay.
So I really thank you.
Oh, it was so lovely to speak with you. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
You are a gift to all of us. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.